The relationship between earthworms and soil fertility has been understood at the practical level for as long as agriculture has existed. Aristotle called earthworms the intestines of the earth. Charles Darwin spent 40 years studying their contribution to soil formation and concluded that few animals have played so important a part in the history of the world. Every traditional agricultural system that maintained long-term soil productivity without synthetic inputs, Chinese wet rice cultivation, traditional Indian kitchen garden management, the raised field systems of pre-Columbian Amazonia, incorporated practices that, viewed through the lens of modern soil ecology, were specifically optimized for maintaining and growing the earthworm populations responsible for the soil quality those systems preserved across centuries. Subscribe and leave a comment telling us about your current soil biology management. Are you actively managing for worm population or treating worms as incidental visitors? Your engagement helps this channel grow. I read every comment. Let us get into the biology. The kitchen scrap category that produces the most rapid and durable worm attraction is cooked starch, cooked rice, pasta, bread, potato, and the reason it outperforms raw vegetable waste for this specific purpose requires understanding what worms are actually responding to when they move toward a food source. Worms are not primary food consumers. They are selective detritivores. They consume organic material already partially processed by microbial activity rather than fresh organic tissue directly. The rapid aerobic fermentation that cooked starch undergoes when buried in moist soil produces lactic acid bacteria, acetic acid bacteria, and the dense microbial biomass that worm chemoreceptors detect at distance and move toward. The worm is not coming for the rice. It is coming for the microbial community that the rice created. Understanding this distinction is the foundation of effective worm attraction management. The VIVOSUN 5-layer worm compost bin is the tool that converts this understanding into a permanent, growing worm ecosystem rather than a series of individual attraction events. Link is in the description. The 5-layer 50-liter design creates the stable, consistently aerobic, consistently moist feeding zone conditions that distinguish a worm population that grows over time from one that visits and leaves. The continuous flow design is the feature that makes this specific system earn its consistently high ratings above single container alternatives. Worms migrate upward through layers as lower layers are processed, meaning finished vermicompost accumulates in lower layers while upper layers continuously provide fresh feeding conditions that keep the worm population active and reproducing at maximum rate. The layered aeration throughout all 5 tiers prevents the anaerobic conditions that collapse worm populations in poorly designed systems, and the odor control keeps the biological activity productive rather than suppressed. The moisture gradient that the VIVOSUN system maintains through its layered aeration design is as important for worm population stability as the food input management. Earthworms are cutaneous breathers. They require moisture at the skin surface for gas exchange. A moisture level below their tolerance threshold drives migration away from the feeding zone. A moisture level above aerobic tolerance creates anaerobic conditions that are toxic to both the worms and the beneficial aerobic microbial community that worm feeding depends on. The VIVOSUN's design maintains the narrow moisture window that optimal worm activity and reproduction requires, not too dry, not too wet, aerobic throughout all 5 layers. Temperature stability in the enclosed 50-liter volume buffers the worm population against the external temperature fluctuations that crash worm reproduction rates during cold periods and drive migration during heat events. Worm reproductive rate is directly temperature dependent. The difference between 15 and 25 degrees Celsius is the difference between reproductive rates that double the population in weeks versus months. The VIVOSUN's enclosed design maintains the stable, moderately warm conditions that maximize reproductive rate through a greater portion of the year than open bed worm management allows. Feed the VIVOSUN system with cooked starch additions combined with carbon balancing material at roughly 2 to 1 carbon to food ratio by volume. The carbon material, shredded cardboard or coconut coir, prevents the pH drop from over-acid fermentation that slows worm activity below optimal rate. Portion additions to match current worm population processing capacity. Overfeeding before the population has grown to match the food supply creates the acidic, anaerobic conditions that kill what you are trying to grow. Start with modest additions and increase as worm numbers visibly grow. The worm castings that a mature VIVOSUN system produces, at 5 times the nitrogen, 7 times the phosphorus, and 11 times the potassium of ordinary soil, are the fertility return on the worm population investment that traditional agricultural systems were maintaining through their kitchen waste management practices for centuries without the ecological vocabulary to describe what they were doing. Subscribe, comment with your worm management situation, and we will see you in the next one.